All right, let's jump right into this. Today, we're completely rethinking how we go about solving the world's most complex problems. We are diving into a really paradigm-shifting academic white paper by Dr. Bashara Saheli. What's so fascinating here is that he takes the concept of regenerative cultures and pushes it straight into the hard, messy realities of governance and political economy. It's an exploration that builds constructively on the influential work of Daniel Christian Wahl, taking us from this broad, beautiful concept of regeneration and forcing us to look at how public institutions actually operate on the ground. Basically, we're going to look at how we can concretely evaluate if a system is truly serving life or just pretending to. To get us started, let's ask ourselves a really foundational question. Can we actually fix a living planet using a mechanic's toolbox? In our modern industrialized societies, we absolutely love to treat our global crises, whether we're talking about climate disruption, biodiversity decline, or social fragmentation, like a broken machine that just needs expert fixing. We think, okay, if we just identify the broken part, isolate it, and engineer a smart technical solution, we can just install it and everything's going to run smoothly again. But treating living, breathing systems like broken engines, it's inherently flawed. It almost always pushes the harm onto someone or somewhere else, creating these hidden dependencies and burdens that remain completely invisible to the mechanics calling the shots at the top. And that exposes the massive friction in our current paradigm. Think about external crisis management for a second. This is where an institution abstracts a problem from afar, designs a universal, one-size-fits-all solution, and then just forces that replicated model onto a passive community. But what we actually need is reflexive participation. This is a completely different approach. It means beginning with a place's actual lived history. It means joining outside expertise with local authority and rigorously tracing the burdens of any solution across time and space. We always kind of think we stand outside the system, like we're sovereign, detached engineers looking down at a map. But in reality, we are already deeply embedded, participating right inside of it. Which brings us to a really crucial concept drawn straight from Daniel Christian Wahl's work, bioregioning. And notice that phrasing. It's not a bioregion as some static, fixed boundary on a map. It's bioregioning. It's a verb. It is a continuing, active process where people deeply investigate the ecological, cultural, and historical relationships of their specific place. The whole goal is to make their way of living responsive to those local conditions. Regeneration, in this sense, isn't a final certified product you can just buy off a shelf. It's not a checklist. It's an ongoing relational process rooted entirely in the unique biocultural reality of a specific place. Now, Dr. Saheli introduces a pretty wild new definition of life itself here: organized relational continuity. Think about it for a second. The actual physical matter in your body right now is constantly changing. Cells die, nutrients are exchanged. You aren't just a static block of material. Living beings remain identifiable not because their material components are frozen in time, but because their patterns of organization and relationship continue through ongoing exchange and transformation. So, life isn't a machine with replaceable parts. It is a bounded, dynamic, actively maintained process. When we look at how these systems operate, the concept of a boundary is super important. In living systems, boundaries don't just divide things up like a brick wall. They actively organize exchange. They regulate what comes in and what goes out. And this is profound, right? Because it means that connection without any boundary at all just becomes intrusion or extraction. But on the flip side, a boundary without relationship just becomes total isolation. To truly regenerate, we need boundaries that are capable of protection, exchange, learning, and correction. So here is a golden rule to keep in mind. Living systems respond according to their existing structure and history. They don't just passively reproduce an external instruction like a computer running a new line of code. If you introduce a new policy, a new shiny technology, or an ecological intervention into a community, that community isn't a blank slate. That intervention is going to be absorbed, resisted, reinterpreted, or redirected based on the system's own deeply ingrained history and power dynamics. You literally cannot just forcefully engineer a community or an ecosystem and expect mechanical compliance. It just doesn't work that way. This shift in thinking requires what the paper calls the regenerative turn. We have to move away from identifying a bounded problem, abstracting it, and just dropping in a replicated solution. Instead, we have to wake up to the fact that the observer, the expert, and the institution are already inside the field being changed. That realization completely shifts our position to life-coherent practice. We transform from being these detached managers delivering finalized solutions to becoming reflexive participants who build local capabilities, maintain systems, and constantly keep our actions open to correction.
And honestly, Daniel Christian Wahl's framework is an incredible starting point for this. He teaches us that regeneration is a fundamental process of life itself, not just some trendy sustainability buzzword. He emphasizes that regenerative cultures must be plural. There is absolutely no single universal blueprint that's going to work for every territory on Earth. It focuses on the right relationship between self, community, and wider life. And perhaps most importantly, it's driven by living questions. Instead of declaring permanent, inflexible solutions, we operate with questions that can evolve as conditions change. It really respects the invisible economy of care and ecological renewal that standard metrics always seem to completely ignore.
But all right, here is where we hit a pretty major complication in this explainer. Wahl talks a lot about the importance of right relationship. But what actually makes a relationship right? Just because a system is deeply interconnected and relational doesn't automatically mean it's just, fair, or healthy. I mean, an exploitative labor arrangement is highly relational, right? A captured regulatory system is deeply interconnected, so relationality alone doesn't automatically equal justice. Resilience, adaptation, circularity, persistence, restoration. We hear these buzzwords literally every single day in the sustainability space, and our brains are kind of trained to assume they are the ultimate, unquestionable goals of any green initiative. We just naturally assume that if a system has these traits, it must be inherently good. But let this harsh reality sink in for a minute. An exploitative labor system can be incredibly resilient. It can bounce back from economic shocks super easily because it just offloads all the suffering onto its most vulnerable workers. A heavily polluted community can adapt to toxic water by spending hours every single day boiling it or spending their scarce income on bottled water. An unjust patriarchal institution can be incredibly adaptive without actually serving life. So we can't just blindly aim for resilience without asking the hard questions. What exactly are we keeping resilient, for whom, and at whose cost? What this means is that regeneration desperately needs a strict moral and normative compass. We need a clear, explicit rule that separates a truly life-serving system from one that simply preserves its own power and transfers its harms onto someone else. Without this compass, a massive corporation can just adopt the word regenerative as a shiny marketing brand, while continuing to externalize all of its ecological costs onto poor territories. And that right there brings us to Dr. Bashara Sahali's breakthrough resolution, the Life Coherence Criterion. This criterion evaluates any arrangement, whether it's a policy, a new tech rollout, or a whole institution, based on three things. First, does it protect or enlarge actual capacities? Second, does it support the enabling conditions required for those capacities? And third, does it secure those gains without causing avoidable disablement or a life cost somewhere else? It forces us to look at the entire picture, not just the isolated PR-friendly success of one local project. Now, to make sure this criterion actually works for real people and doesn't just get hijacked, we have to be very clear about what it is and what it is not. The Life Coherence Criterion is not a proprietary algorithm. It's not a tradable corporate ESG score. It is a public safeguard. It's rights protective, meaning you can't just trample human rights to score an ecological win. It's anti-paternalist, meaning experts can't just parachute in and dictate the good to a community without their active participation. And crucially, it recognizes non-compensable limits. That means you cannot offset the destruction of a sacred site or the crossing of a critical planetary boundary just by claiming you created economic growth somewhere else. Let's unpack those terms a bit more, because they're important. When we talk about capacities, we aren't just talking about a formal legal right written on a piece of paper. We are talking about real, supported possibilities. It forces us to look at actual practical ability. You might have a formal entitlement to healthcare, sure, but if you lack the transport, the time, or the secure income to actually get to the clinic, your capacity is totally incomplete. The enabling conditions are the material, cultural, and ecological realities, things like clean air, bodily health, or even your native language, that make those capacities practically possible in the real world. Then we hit the third pillar, and this is the one that really holds our feet to the fire: avoidable disablement. This criterion demands that when you, your workplace, or your community gains a new benefit, we must actively stop and ask, who is paying the invisible cost? Are we importing our fancy green tech materials from a supply chain that relies on forced labor? Are we just pushing the industrial pollution a few miles outside the city limits? We have to ask if a credible, less disabling alternative exists to achieve our goals. To actually spot that invisible harm, we have to test our solutions recursively across different scales. It's like a giant puzzle. We look at the person, Then we zoom out to the household or community, then the institution, out to the wider territory and supply chain, and finally the broader ecosystem and future generations. We absolutely have to do this because a national policy that looks like an incredible climate win locally might actually be built on concentrated, irreversible ecological extraction in an entirely different territory. If it fails at scale 4 or 5, it's not truly life coherent. Ultimately, what this entire paradigm shift is telling us is a really profound lesson about our place in the world. We are reflexive participants in life's regeneration. We are not external managers standing above nature, delivering technical solutions down to the masses. And because we are inside these systems, our responsibility is entirely proportionate to our power, our resources, and our knowledge. We have to constantly learn, stay humble, and relentlessly correct our errors as we participate in the messy, incredibly complex, and beautiful systems that sustain us. So, I'm going to leave you with this really powerful question to ask yourself. The next time you hear a proposed solution or a brand new technological fix for our planetary crises, ask yourself, does this way of dwelling, does this specific intervention truly protect or enlarge life? And crucially, does it do so without securing those gains through avoidable disablement somewhere else? Because if it just shifts the burden, it isn't regeneration. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a whole new lens for evaluating the solutions of tomorrow.